Alright, now I'm going to play against the Duke of Edinburgh, a 10-minute game on Chess24. The Duke is one of my patrons from Patreon.com, where people can support me, and I'm looking forward to this game. So you see the first move is already on the board. It is 1f4. I didn't expect that. I thought he would play 1e4. So I will go knight h6. I hope he hasn't prepared for this. It's my kind of specialty move. I've actually also recorded a video about this. I played this once in a game against, what was her name? Woman International Master Linares, I think. You can find this game on my channel. Knight h6, really interesting move. And what is the point? It looks so stupid, right? Probably right now my opponent is thinking, am I joking? But there is a point behind it, because now I will play d5, and the knight goes to f5 anyway in these positions. And the kind of trick to start with knight h6 is that if then white plays b3, what actually happened in my game against Linares, Gomez Linares, black can go e5, and it's an improved version of the pawn sacrifice, a gambit. But now we're just transposing. I play d5 and I follow up with c5, and the knight will go to f5, which is a beautiful square for the knight here. So my opponent is planning to put the bishop on g2 and castle, I assume, and I will just develop naturally. And why did I play c5 here? Well, I want to grab more space in the center, and oftentimes black can even go d4 to grab even more space. So now I will continue my development, knight c6. And next I'm thinking of going knight f5 followed by h5, h4, which is a very typical way to undermine the white king side. So he plays d3. Alright, now I could go knight f5. What are my other options? I could go d4, which is very typical, to lock it in. After knight f5, he might be able to go e4. And I don't like that much. e4 takes, queen takes, king takes. Looks like white is doing fine there. So I will start with d4, so that white cannot go e4. And I can play knight f5 next move. He plays c3, but it doesn't bother me. I'll play knight f5 nonetheless, because he can take, I'll take back. And not sure yet what I'm going to do with my bishop. Maybe I'm going to go g6, bishop g7. It feels kind of more natural. I could also go h5 now. And I'm kind of curious how he will react to this. I'm threatening to go h4 and h3 and just bother him and attack him on the king side. So what can white do here? One idea would be to play bishop h1, which looks awkward, but the point is it's prophylactic thinking. My opponent knows I want to go h4 next, and he would like to react with g4. But the problem is that then I could probably go h3 and attack the bishop from g2. So if white plays the bishop back to h1, I can't do that, and white could follow up next move with h3, stabilizing his pawns. He plays queen e1, which is not really stopping h4. I could still play it now, and I'm really considering it. The question is then g4, h3, bishop h1. But then I could, for example, go knight h6, and I like that. I don't have to play that aggressively. I could also just keep developing g6. But I don't see anything wrong with it, so I'm gonna go for it. If he takes, no, he goes g4, and now I push h3, like I said. Otherwise, white could play h3 himself. And now I could go to e3, but then white probably takes and plays queen g3, and he's doing okay. So I go knight h6 to force g5. And if white plays g5, I can hop right back to f5. I have a beautiful square there, and the h3 pawn will be quite unpleasant for white because it's restricting the king, it's restricting the bishop on h1. So he plays queen g3, and it seems he will just give up the pawn on g4. I could take with the bishop, or I could take with the knight. Both moves will protect the pawn on h3. So what feels more logical? Bishop takes g4 is developing a piece. Knight takes g4 is putting my knight in an active spot. Difficult to choose. I like both, obviously, since I'm winning a pawn, but I can't really see a disadvantage of either one. So I guess I kind of follow my gut here, play bishop takes g4, because I am developing another piece, the bishop. And also I'm later hoping to put my knight back on f5. Now he plays knight d2, and he might want to put his knight on e4. So I could go bishop f5 to stop him from doing so, because then I could take the knight on e4. Always look out for what your opponent is going to do next. That's very important. Yeah, I don't like him to go knight e4, so I play bishop f5. And also, well, maybe next move I could go knight g4. He goes knight e4 anyway. And now I'm just going to take. Or am I? Well then, my pawn on h3 might become a little bit loose. That's not how I planned all of this. So do I want to take after all? Maybe I'll just play e6. Yeah, I'll just play e6. Okay, change the plan. Never too late for that. Now knight h4. Okay, this is not really threatening anything, because if white takes on f5, I take back with the knight, and I want to bring my knight back to f5 anyway. So I'll go bishop e7 and attack the knight on h4. White couldn't take on g7 because of rook g8, and now I have the knight on the perfect spot again, f5, beautiful outpost, attacking the queen on g3. And I think I can apply some more pressure now. I could go bishop h4 or rook h6. Rook h6 bring the rook to g6, which should really could really bother white because his king is not having a lot of space. So those are my options I'm looking at. Bishop h4 would force most likely queen f3. The question is whether to start with rook h6 or bishop h4, but I like rook h6 better to stay more flexible. If bishop f3, then bishop h4. If knight g3, now I can still go bishop h4 or rook g6. Or I could also take, because if queen takes, I can play rook g6. Ooh, taking also looks interesting. If h takes, then h2 check, king g2. That really smells fishy. Queen d5 check, queen f3. White is barely holding on. Queen f5, g4. Still surviving, but I can't really believe this stuff. Can't really believe it. This looks on the edge of game over. Of course, bishop h4 or rook g6 also look quite strong, so maybe I don't have to overthink here. On the other hand, if there is a forced win, of course you should go for it, but I don't find it 100% convincing, so I'll just play bishop h4. takes. So he makes some space for the king. Okay. And now you could play queen f3. That's true. But I might just still take on g3 and just ignore the threat of him taking on c6. Because I'll just sidestep. And I don't care about the pawns. I care about the king. Okay, now I can take on g3. Or I can play rook g6. Or I can play queen d5. And I think queen d5 is quite strong. Because if queen f3, then I'll take on g3. And I will in the exchange, or probably more than the exchange, on f1. So probably white shouldn't take back on g3. Well, he could. Okay, now I will just take back. How do I want to take back? I think I'll even take like this to open up the e-file and target the pawn on e2 later. But both moves were completely fine. But I like the special kind of pawn structure I have here. And if now white takes on g3, I'll take back and grab the rook on f1. White can't even take because then I would queen with the h pawn. So the best white can do here is to not take and play something else. For example, rook f3. But now I can just move my bishop and I'm up a piece. So where should I go with the bishop? I could go to e1. I'll go to e1. If I go to h4, he could take my pawn on h3. And now I'm threatening the pawn on c3. So I'm expecting rook f1 to challenge my bishop again. And then I'll go back to h4. Notice that white can't develop his bishop right now. d2 is covered and e3 is covered as well. Of course, white could play bishop e3 and then take the bishop on e1 the next move, but that's not really helping. So rook f3 again, hoping for me to repeat moves, but I will not repeat moves, but move my bishop back, and again threatening the pawn on c3. Now I place bishop d2, and I go king d7 to prepare my rook coming to e8. Also I could play rook b8, I kind of missed that. Rook b8 would have been also quite strong. Rook g1. And now I could go rook b8 still. And everything's protected over here, so I don't have to worry. And white has a difficult task to face, how to defend his pawn on b2. If bishop c1, I can take the pawn on c3. If b3, I can also take the pawn on c3. And if c takes d4, I could have taken with the knight attacking the rook on f3. Now I have a triple pawn. Triple threat, I like to say. What now? Maybe just rook e8. Now go for the e2 pawn. If rook f2, I can go bishop d4. So, and if rook e1, I can go bishop h4. It's difficult for white to defend this pawn. Maybe e3. Yeah, e3 is probably the best white can do. That's what he plays. So I still have to kind of break through. So, Not quite sure how exactly I'm going to do it. Maybe I'll just bring the rook back for now and double on the e-file, and then see where I can go from there and put some pressure on the e3 pawn, because this is stopping me right now from entering. e4, okay, well, that helps me to enter. Check, I go bishop d4. Also taking away the square on g1 from the white king. And next I might go c2 or double on the e-file, preparing rook e1. Rook d3, well, this is now immediately allowing me to go rook e1. And now it will be checkmate next move, right here. Alright, thanks a lot for the game, Duke of Edinburgh. And let's talk about real quick. So, in the opening, okay, this knight h6, just to point out what the idea was, if b3, then black can get an improved version of this pawn sacrifice e5. Knight f3 is the best move here. And now I think it's better to maybe develop the bishop to this diagonal, because now if white plays c5, then black can go, if black goes c5, then white can go bishop b5 check. Or go b3 and play on the dark squares. With g3, I found it difficult to find a good spot for the bishop on c1. And also that's what we see in the game, the bishop really couldn't find a good square to be effective. So here I think it's already quite pleasant for black. But maybe bishop h1, I mean this looks so awkward too. Maybe h4, maybe h4. So the point of bishop h1 would be to go h4, g4, and then white could go h3 next move. But it still looks awkward, let's be honest. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the white position at this point already. And now, yeah, now it's just a positional mess. The only move to not lose a pawn is to go g5, but then knight f5 and the pawn h3 will be so annoying for white. And I have this strong knight on f5, I can follow up with g6, bishop g7, and white has a weak king. It's really difficult for white already. So in the game, knight e4, e6. Yeah, now knight h4, this maneuver didn't help. Probably best. Maybe white can do something like this, knight e5. And then knight takes e5, d takes e5, f takes e5, and then at least this bishop becomes open. Can go to g5 or so. So I think that would have been a better way to play. Because here white is getting the bishop, but my knight has improved dramatically. And my position is very stable with the knight on f5. And now I'm also launching the attack, and I think from here on forward not much white can do. He also thought about takes and h2 check, king g2, queen d5 check, queen f3, queen f5, threatening queen h3, but it wasn't completely clear to me, so I decided to go bishop h4. And now takes, and now after king h1 white loses material. I think the best try would have been to go queen f3, but yeah, it's just lost here, I think. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and knight takes. If queen takes, rook g6. White can take on c6, but I'll just run away with my king. And the white king is too open. I can't see white defending this. Rook f2. No. Queen h4. This has to be game over. Threatening h2 check. If rook h2, I can play knight takes e2, for example. Rook takes, queen g3 check. Queen f3 check. Or if king h2, I can just play knight e4, hitting queen and rook, and this is also game over. White is not having these two pieces in the game, the rook and the bishop, and also the queen is far away from the action. And then after king h1, there was nothing white can do anymore here, because if he takes, then after knight takes g3, I'll fork rook and king, and white can't even take the rook because that would make matters even worse after h2. Alright, so thanks again for the game, and hope you guys enjoyed it, and see you soon. Bye bye.